Previously on He Made Me Do It.
It's a whole different world being in jail.
Wait, she's not the girlfriend, she's the victim.
There is significant harm to the community with her being outside.
And if we believe that people will drink poison for a cult leader, why do we not believe that a person will commit a crime with someone else who has broken them down so systematically?
He sent me a letter, like trying to manipulate me into not testifying against him.
The I-Team uncovered something that, as far as we can tell, never came up in court. During the day on July 11th, 2022, the day before the robbery in Anthem, Matthew Jones's sister called Scottsdale police. The call log from police said Jones's sister was concerned about a friend of her brother's named Helen, who had a possible confrontation with her brother. Details, police wrote, were vague, but Jones's sister said Helen had 2 black eyes, and that Helen and her brother had already left the apartment. Scottsdale police went to the apartment, calling it a welfare check, but it never turned into an official report.
They never saw Helen. They never saw Matthew, it seems. What do you make of that, knowing what would come the next day?
We have to be careful about saying someone should have done something if we didn't give them enough to go on. She didn't call 911. She wasn't there. They didn't interact with her. I wish they had. I think everybody wishes, including every single person involved in the case.
It's true. Helen never called the police, but she did talk to someone else, Matthew's mother, who kept calling during the ordeal. After they fled the apartment, Helen said Matthew Jones took her to a place believed to be Arizona Falls on the canal.
It's like, hey, you know what's gonna happen. You can't be telling her the truth because she's gonna call the police.
She said he had his gun and forced her to tell his mother over the phone that everything was fine.
And she's like, are you okay? Like, where are you? I'm like, I just want to go home. I'm like, can you just help me go home? Like, tell Matthew to bring me home.
Matthew's mother, who spoke to us off camera, confirmed this call happened and that Helen told her she was fine. His mom said she didn't know why Helen would do that if she was really in trouble.
But he did tie me up, and so I started to tell her about that, and he grabbed the phone from me and almost immediately hung up. And that was when he told me, he's like, I can't go home because of you, and you can't go home anymore because you have that black eye. He's like, I can't go home, you can't go home, so what are we supposed to do? This is all your fault.
Which is how Helen said they ended up at that Scottsdale motel. When she first talked to investigators, she believed that the sex trafficking only happened in California.
I'm sorry, this is a touchy subject, even for cops. I heard something about sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. Tell me all about that.
None of it happened in Phoenix.
But Dominique thinks that Helen was also trafficked in Arizona.
But if you ask questions about what happened, she absolutely was. Matthew Jones accepted drugs in order for a stranger to have sex with her.
According to what Helen later reported to police and to us, this was at that Scottsdale motel, hours after Jones's sister called police, and hours before the robbery in Anthem.
Do you feel like it was consensual?
Mm-hmm.
Why might someone in Helen's position not realize that she's being trafficked?
So I don't think most of us realize what the parameters of sex trafficking are. I have worked with over 3,000 victims of trafficking, and I would say 20% of them really understood the victimization they experienced.
I think people don't understand is because they maybe don't understand what human trafficking is. They assume that they're being snatched off the street and being held against their will in these physical chains and basements, and they're not. It's psychological chains of coercion and control.
Janelle Goodrich runs From Silence to Saved, a nonprofit that, in part, helps human trafficking survivors navigate the criminal justice system in Denver.
Just these typical screening questions. Do you have control of your documents? Do you have control of your own money? Are you able to come and go as you want? Are you ever in fear if you don't do what your partner is asking you to do? Do you see that they only have the clothes on their back? Do you see that maybe they're a little malnourished? Maybe they're not eating as much as they should, and they're not talking to their family like they used to, things like that.
Janelle is not involved with Helen's case and has never met her. But the records reviewed by the I-Team show that what Helen reported checks nearly every one of Janelle's boxes for screening.
And the problem is people seem to forget that we can have 2 of the same true thoughts, even if they're different, right? And so just because you committed a crime doesn't mean that you can't also be a victim of a crime.
Dominique and her team at ASU are working to better identify people who need help In February 2023, her office helped launch a statewide human trafficking hotline. As of June 2024, they've had 193 calls.
Everything from a hairdresser calling and saying they think one of their customers was being trafficked, to a person at a bus stop screaming that her trafficker was trying to find her and could we help her find safety.
Her team also partnered with MCSO on a program at the Estrella Jail, where women can flag themselves as victims of trafficking and connect with resources.
Women who are incarcerated are some of our most traumatized people in the country.
In the second half of 2023, Dominique said nearly 100 women flagged at the jail were connected to these services.
And that's all great. Like, there's a lot of programming in there, but these are women that are already in jail.
Right. It's too late. What can we do before a person's trafficked when they are vulnerable? We absolutely have to prevent this from happening to anyone. They need to know the language of it. They need to know what to look for. They need to know that if a Matthew Jones approaches them, what he is saying and what that means, and have the words for it to keep themselves safe.
Helen admits now she didn't know how to spot red flags.
I never thought it happened to me, but it can happen to anybody.
And at some points just ignored them.
Better to be safe than sorry. Because in my case, I was not being safe, and here I am.
But she also wonders if anything else could have helped prevent what would ultimately happen. There's Jones's sister's call to police that never turned into anything. Matthew Jones was on probation, and he wasn't supposed to have a gun. Then there's the dating app. There's no way for us to see if Helen or Matthew had profiles on Tinder or any other apps, whether they matched or if anything was said. A rep for Tinder said they didn't have any record of Helen Simmons meeting Matthew Jones, and the rep did not answer any of our other questions, including how they keep felons from signing up. The I-Team found a copy of Tinder's terms of use from 2022, when this would have happened, which states that felons are prohibited from creating accounts, but that the company doesn't do any criminal background checks, and that Tinder is not responsible for the conduct of any member on or off the service.
Should someone have been monitoring him?
In my opinion, yeah. Why was he allowed to just, come out and be able to do this to whoever he wanted?
While Helen's reports of abuse are up in the air, the case against her in the robbery is moving through court. When trying to figure out next steps, the judge acknowledges Helen's situation.
The fact that Ms. Simmons immediately when she was arrested told the arresting officers what she had been through at the hands of Mr. Jones, it seems like there really may be an issue here of Ms. Simmons doing these things after being threatened with just not abuse, but death threats, threats to her sister's lives, physical abuse, all kinds of things.
But the state's case holds weight with the judge, too.
You're going to argue that it's at that point she could have alerted someone, asked for help, ran away, something to get away from him.
Although Helen said Jones forced her to do everything,
They've told me that a duress defense is not available.
Duress is the legal term when someone says they were coerced or forced against their will into committing a crime. Helen said she was told she can't use duress as a defense because the jeweler suffered physical injuries in the shooting, even though records show Matthew Jones was the one who pulled the trigger.
I understand that in the state of Arizona, you can't use a direct defense when somebody gets hurt. But I didn't hurt anybody. I destroyed property and I scared people. And I don't want to undermine or diminish what the victims went through. I feel like prosecuting me for that, as if I willingly did it, is not justice. I feel like I deserve justice and the victims do as well.
With a duress defense off the table,
Where this case is headed currently, do you feel like justice is being served?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
it seemed like Helen's only path forward would be through prison.
And absolutely, 100%, I agree that the victims at the jewelry store also have trauma. But this came from him. He started this.
Next time on He Made Me Do It.
They should have looked at this case and said, wow, she's abused.
Drop the charges and charge her appropriately for breaking the glass.
Has anyone forced you or threatened you in any way to get you to plead guilty?
No.
They have a duty to look into all of the claims, as does law enforcement.